And just Zephaniah chapter 3 and verse 8 is a very important verse in summarizing the perspective that we're looking at from Scripture. Because when we talk about the United Nations, Israel's place with the family of nations, the way in which the 20th century saw the rise of these organizations in a unique way, Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 8 is something that comes to mind, which is, therefore, wait ye upon me, said Yahweh, until the day that I rise up to the prey, for my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. And we know that the God of Israel, our Heavenly Father, does not judge without there being responsibility of those that have judged. Even in the days of Noah, he was a preacher of righteousness. All the way through God's dealings, even Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot was vexing his righteous soul, that there was warning through the prophets and through his agencies to hold people accountable. And that judgment was deferred, third and fourth generation, as in AD 70 and so on. So I think what Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 8 is asking us, well, how will the world be held accountable? What will be the measure of justice that is going to be meted out? What is it that the nations of the world are doing wrong? Russia coming to take a spoil is just part of a bigger picture. Right? It's not all about Russia, is it? Or this Gogian. That's one part of the jigsaw puzzle of Bible prophecy. But the moral message, God is holding the world accountable as he holds us accountable. And so we see with the emergence of the nation of Israel, how this has unfolded on the world stage for 2,000 years. Particularly Christian anti-Semitism has led to the most dreadful massacres, pogroms, and slaughters. And of course, great irony, wasn't it? It's that the Russian pogroms that led Theodor Herzl to review the whole situation of the future of the Jewish people. And it was French anti-Semitism in the Dreyfus affair, where he was a reporter on that case, led him to consider what is the future of the Jewish people. And a Jewish state was the only answer. This is exactly what Scripture is requiring, the creation of a Jewish state. That he was not a believer in Bible prophecy. He was not a believer in God. As Brother Thomas said, that the first regathering would be in unbelief. What an amazing thing to see how that had worked through. Because it took the First World War to create the space by the drying up of the River Euphrates and the emergence of nationalism in the Middle East, allowing the opportunity for, under minimal help of Britain, allowed somewhere for the Jews to go. But it was the Second World War that really was the trigger. And, again, it's one of those signs which is hard to overemphasize. The concept that the Second World War itself was caused by anti-Semitism. Not that it was a feature of what Hitler wanted to do, but the actual etiology, the cause of the Second World War was the hatred of the Jews, that he invaded Russia in order to exterminate the Jews in Eastern Europe, the Ukraine, and the Soviet Union. I mean, that's an amazing thought. Right? And this is from the Times of Israel recently. Anti-Semitism is a cancer that eats the world, and World War II is proof of that. This preeminent scholar of the Holocaust. These 29 million victims died up to a point, and probably mainly because of anti-Semitism. Not because of Jews, but because of the hatred of Jews. Of course, Hitler himself and the Nazis blamed the Jews for the war. And in a perverted way they were. If they hadn't been there, he wouldn't have wanted to exterminate them. You see the inversion of justice, the inversion of truth. It's the very opposite of what could be thought of a reasonable assessment of the case. And we did, and you can go, it's all a bit sick really, but you can go as a tourist to Auschwitz. And we did that. We went because we went on this little 3-day trip to Poland, and we went to Auschwitz. And I was deeply upset. Not, I knew what was there, but I was upset at the children laughing on their way in. School children. And just doing what young kids do, laughing and fooling around as they're walking, through the gates of Auschwitz. I think this is not the right thing. And this thing here is pretty upsetting to me because it's the quarantine list. Right? You're quarantined for infectious diseases, right? You put people in quarantine. These people, this is the list of people who get off these trucks to be exterminated. It's called the quarantine list. Because Himmler said that anti-Semitism is exactly the same as delousing. Getting rid of lice is not a question of ideology, it is a matter of cleanliness. It's just the same way anti-Semitism for us has not been a question of ideology, but a matter of cleanliness. That's how low humans can stoop. Now, with the creation of Israel, anti-Semitism has morphed into the hatred of Israel, anti-Zionism. And you've got this debate going on whether anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. There was a debate in Canada, it was broadcast on the media in the last few days, where you can listen to it online, whether hatred of the Jews has become hatred of Zionism, or whether you can be against Israel as a nation without hating the Jews. And that's the debate that's going on. Now, this writer, Jack Wallace-Simmons, editor of the Jewish Chronicle, has written a book which is a remarkably, it's a collection of evidence for his case. It goes into details of the most severe travesties of justice in the case. If you want the catalogue of the evidence, I can't produce that for you, but he says there are 3 stages. First of all, there's demonization. Jews are octopuses. Jews are controlling the world. Jews are only ever interested in money. Jews are war makers. Jews are corruptors. Jews are, so all the tropes, right? You demonize the Jews, right? But what do you expect? They're Jews. Well, of course he's rich, he's a Jew. Of course he's corrupt, he's a Jew. Of course they control him. Of course they control Hollywood. Of course they do. Everybody knows that, right? You create this demonization. Well, of course, it's just a summary of 2,000 years at least of that phenomenon. Then you weaponize it, right? So you get people to make films about it. You get celebrities to come along and to parrot some of these lies. I didn't know that. I thought that was true. I didn't realize it was going to be used in this way, as some of the Hollywood stars have said that they've been used in this way. You get the United Nations to weaponize these things. You get the International Court of Justice. You get the International Criminal Court to condemn Israel. Who else are you condemning? No, not just Israel. Right? You get people on the streets chanting with placards against Israel. Who else you chant? Nobody. But there's real genocide going on in the world. There are real exterminations going on. There's real horrors going on in the world. 100 times what you're talking about now. No, it's Israel. So how did that happen? How did you get that? Extraordinary bias. How is that possible? How could young people in schools, in colleges, 80% of them say, we're on Hamas's side. We agree. We'll go and chant by any means. You mean murder of children, rape? That's okay to justify the end of wiping out the Jewish state? Do you know what you're saying? And of course, the answer is probably a lot of them don't know what they're saying. Why are they saying it then? how can they be mobilized? How can they be weaponized? Something's going on then behind the scenes, isn't it? Something else is mobilizing them. And then the third stage is falsification. You tell lies and they believe. And of course, that was Hitler's strategy. If you tell the lie, if it's big enough and you say it long enough, people will believe. Right? This is a world that is going to be judged. I'm not saying it's reached the final stage, because I think artificial intelligence can actually take us a stage further. How long the Lord will allow that to happen, I don't know. It is going to, as all these are not going to understand what's going to happen, but it's going to explode. And nobody will know truth from falsehood. Nobody will know genuine from artificial. You know, brethren, tried, they've asked AI on their phones, write me a Christadelphian exhortation on Matthew chapter 12. And they'll get a perfectly acceptable exhortation. If you say, write me a Catholic sermon on Matthew 12, you get a Catholic sermon. They'll know the difference between what we're expecting and what the Catholics are expecting. Right? Now, what that's going to do to young minds, I have no idea. Nobody really knows. In the age of the super intelligent computer, nobody knows where that's going to take us. But I could see that there may be yet one more stage in society's decline before us. I just hope it doesn't last very long. It might spiral out of control. So the State of Israel was born under the auspices of the United Nations. They had a partition plan which the Arabs didn't want. The Arabs invaded, tried to take the land from the river to the sea. They didn't manage it. Israel pushed them back. As I said to you earlier on, they still celebrate or commemorate the Holocaust. The reason basically behind the creation of the State of Israel, everybody accepted that. It was, Russia voted in favor. America was the first to recognize it. Everybody, they've got to go somewhere. Look what we've done to them. We can't, we closed the doors. We're all guilty. Give them a little space the size of Wales. Wales is not very big. Right? They take a long time to drive from north to south, but it's still not very big, right? We covered Wales driving from Rugby to here, right? So that's the situation. But what's happened? Last year was the first celebration of the Nakba. That's what the Palestinians caused the creation of the state, the Nakba. Right? That's what happened. That's how the world has changed. United Nations has now regretting bitterly that it ever supported the creation of the State of Israel. And so what we find is we're getting this question now. At the beginning of the Gaza conflict, it wasn't obvious that we're talking about an existential battle for Israel. Israel was saying that, but the rest of the world was saying, no, you're the powerful one. You've got all the military. You've got all the might. You can sort that out. Don't be too harsh. Don't do anything. Actually, just leave it. Let it be. We don't want any further trouble. But Israel has pointed out they are facing an existential battle, and now the young people on the streets and the college campuses are insisting from the river to the sea, which means the extermination of the State of Israel and potentially. What will happen? What will happen to the Israeli Jews who live there? Where will they go? Some of them, kids on the streets, and let them go back to Poland. Now, that's a pretty sinister thing to say, isn't it? Go back to Poland. Well, where was Auschwitz? Yeah, they're talking about deep down. That is what it actually means. And half the Jews are not white Europeans anyway. Half the Jews are Mizrahi Jews. They're Middle Eastern. You see, they're Middle Eastern. They're not white. Where are they going to go back? 900,000 of them lost their homes and were booted out of Iraq and Yemen and Baghdad and so on, right? and Iran. So where are they going to go? Well, sorry, I don't care about that. The crowds aren't shouting, give them a home somewhere else. They're not shouting, send them to Rwanda or anything. They don't care. That's not the point. It's never been the point. You see. So now, when 1967 came, Psalm 83 was well known amongst us. So then said, no, it's not. It doesn't apply there, or it's not. I was baptized in 1967 on the back of the Six-Day War. Psalm 83 was powerful. I can tell you now, it was powerful. There was the Palestinians with a dagger in the map of Israel. That was powerful. The word of God was there. But something I haven't really noticed, which I've highlighted there now in Psalm 33, is this reference to crafty counsel. But I think in 1967, it just was, the Arabs have got together and they decided to attack Israel. I think now looking back and looking at what's going on today, crafty counsel is not a bad word for the strategy that lies behind what's going on. Right? They've consulted in crafty counsel, verse 5, they've consulted together with one. Something more is going on than is on the surface. And one of the things is pretty obvious that the biggest bloc of nations in the United States, in the United Nations, is the Muslim countries, 57 members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 2 billion people. And that's why they've got such force. That's why no country can ignore its Muslim population, because they control a lot of the energy sources of the world. How can you support, 15 million Jews against 2 billion people? Because the United Nations is a strange phenomenon, isn't it? Because here, before the assembled nations, as Isaiah 43 calls them together in a special Millennium Summit, Ehud Barak quotes to them Micah and Jeremiah. I mean, that is staggering. We know this, you've probably heard it many times. Watch the videos, but it's just a staggering concept that the nations are hearing Isaiah, Jeremiah, and year after year, especially when Benjamin Netanyahu was standing, he gave them a little potted history, Christadelphian history of the world. King David reigned over a Jewish state in our eternal capital, Jerusalem. Defying the laws of history, we ingathered the exiles, restored their independence. But you see what happened? We did that. We ingathered the nations. We rebuilt our national life. The Jewish people have come home. We will never be uprooted again. So I think that is the cause now of the next phase. That confidence in self is extraordinary. And the world has turned. This was the 2016-2017 UN, 20 condemnations of Israel, one for Iran, one for North Korea, one for Russia, and one for Syria. Right? The European football matches, can you imagine a score which is 20 for Israel, 3 for the rest of the world. Israel wins that competition by a long way. It's not even a fair competition, is it? You can't have a side winning with 20 goals. No, but in anti-Semitic competitions, it's the only winner. This is the UN General Assembly resolutions in 2022. Israel beats the rest of the world 15-13. And just think what's going on in the rest of the world. Just think what's been going on in the rest of the world. I don't need to tell you, about Syria, about China, about Russia, about Ukraine, about Congo. People don't even bother reporting in the newspapers the devastation going in the Congo, Sudan, and so on. They don't count. Those black people don't count. This is part of the injustice of the world. They don't even bear a mention in the Western press. In fact, tens of thousands have been slaughtered and desecrated. Didn't get mentioned. People so interested in racial equality in the West. Not at all. What a travesty. What a delusion. In 2015 to the present, General Assembly condemnations. 155 against Israel. 155, just looking at these countries, 155. This is Human Rights Council condemnation resolution since 2026. 108 against Israel, right? They're winning the Premier Division by miles. This is even the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization. What's that got to do with Israel? The World Health Organization. 10 condemnations of Israel. No condemnations of anybody else. No condemnations of Syria. There's been epidemics by the ton in Syria, in the refugee camps. No condemnation. No, let's condemn Israel. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, what is also amazing is the silence about this. You know, the British papers are not outraged. Nobody's outraged by this except us. And Israel. Where are the headlines saying, you know, UN horribly biased, World Health Organization needs to close down, horribly biased? Where is that? Only in the, you know, the crazy media online, nothing in the main press. And the UN Watch pointed out that it's the tone of the resolutions that's different. What makes UN resolutions and they're so different from virtually every other country specific resolution is that they are suffused with political hyperbole, selective reporting, and the systematic suppression of any countervailing facts that might provide balance in background information or context. By contrast, resolutions in other countries tend to be diplomatic, deferential, often contain praise. For example, even Human Rights Council resolutions on the perpetrator of atrocities such as Saddam, at the time when his now former president Omar al-Bashir was wanted for genocide by the International Criminal Court, routinely included language praising and commending Khartoum and urging international aid funds to its government. It's a completely different tone. But what does Scripture say? Well, Numbers 23, I'd like to spend time looking at Balaam's prophecies, because I think all of Balaam's prophecies are remarkable in this regard. They seem to be the earliest summary of the whole purpose of God relating to the people of Israel and the nations. So Numbers 23 verse 9, "Lo, the people shall dwell alone and shall not be reckoned among the nations." You think, well, if there was a United Nations, what prediction would you make? Okay, let's say you tell Balaam, there's going to be United Nations, right? What's your prediction, Balaam? How do you understand what God has just told you to say? Well, you probably say, well, they're not going to fit, are they? They're going to be ostracized, are they? Is that? Well, that's exactly what's happened. Israel is now openly pariah state. There are academics in Britain, you know, I still have connections, unfortunately, with universities in a way, but they want to boycott Israel. They don't want to boycott Syria. They don't boycott Iran. They don't want to boycott other bad places. They want to boycott Israel. They want to disinvest in Israel. They don't want to disinvest in other places. They just want to disinvest in Israel. Right? How is that? And Benjamin Netanyahu said that 10 years ago. If Israel is forced to stand alone, Israel will stand alone. What basic things to say in the light of that prophecy? See, what Balaam does in these 7 prophecies that God has given to him, he takes us back to Esther, actually, because the arch-villain was Haman, the Agagite, the descendant of Amalek. And there they are in Numbers 23 to 24. In contrast with Israel will dwell alone, then let my last end be like this. In the end, it's going to come good for Israel. Right? They will rise up as a great lion. They will be higher than Agag, who is going to be the perpetrator of genocidal attempts in Esther and from there on. They will smite Moab and Ammon. So Moab and Ammon are coming into this latter-day picture here, which is interesting, right? Sometimes people say, oh, those prophecies have all been fulfilled, but Moab and Ammon and Edom. I'm not so sure about that. Amalek will perish forever. The Kenites shall be wasted. Even Asher will perish forever. So I think we've been directed now to look at what's going to happen in the latter days. So Ezekiel chapter 25, as we've read, let's try and pull out some of the things that Ezekiel 25 is saying. I'm not presuming these are all latter-day prophecies. Just look at the spirit of animosity against what is God judging them for. And Ammon, first of all, was, I'm told, I've read 60% of the Jordanian population is Palestinian. So that's quite interesting in itself. There's a huge number of Palestinians there waiting for their return. Right? So Ammon and Moab is what we call verse 3. Right? Thou sayest, aha, against my sanctuary. So they're gloating, right? They're doing that rejoicing bit. Verse 6, they clap their hands and rejoice. Verse 8 is Moab. Look what Moab says in verse 8. Judah's like all the heathen. They're not special. They're not chosen. They're just one of the other nations. That's their problem. They think they're special. They're not. What does Edom say in verse 12? Well, he's after revenge. He's after taking revenge. It's a resentment, a bitterness against them. And the Philistines, inhabitants of the Gaza Strip, in verse 15, what's their problem? Well, they want to destroy Israel. Why? Whoa, what's your motivation? You got the coast, you got the beaches, you could build hotels, you could make yourselves this wonderful Levant holiday destination. I know you want the mountains. No, we want to destroy it. Look, when Palestinians were given back Gaza, Israel had left there a whole industry, agricultural industry. And the first thing they did, they destroyed it. Do you think that if they get back, if Hamas gets the whole of Israel, that there will be any greenness left in the desert? Do you think so? Do you think there'll be fields of wheat and barley and so on? They want to destroy it. Why? For the ancient hatred. And that ancient hatred, that is the same word in Genesis 3:15. That's the enmity. That is the hatred. I think it's as fundamental as that. And I would like to just go into chapter 35 to see this. I'm not presuming I say he's a latter day, but I can't hardly think that Ezekiel 35 and 36 are not latter day. Another 25 is the spirit of chapter 25, the spirit of animosity, right, lives on for sure in the people living in the very area where Ammon, Moab, and Edom were. Right? So that perpetual hatred is in Ezekiel 35, verse 5, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred. Right? And what do they say? Verse 10, these two nations, these two countries shall be mine. We will possess it. Motivation, verse 12. Envy, according to thine envy, which thou used out of thy hatred. Hatred, envy. We're back in Genesis. We've got a Cain and Abel situation. There's a jealousy of acceptance of being a chosen one and a hatred that leads to animosity and murder. That's what Cain, that was the spirit of Cain against his brother. It is the ancient hatred, the perpetual hatred. It's the hatred of Esau against Jacob. Esau, he ought to have been the inheritor. He's the firstborn. Hates his brother. He never forgives. It's a perpetual hatred. By this time. That's what's going on. And you see verse 12, I've heard thy blasphemies. They're giving us, Islam has replaced Judaism. Islam is a religion that has taken the promises to Abraham and said the Jews corrupted the text It wasn't Isaac, it was Ishmael. It wasn't Jacob, it was Esau. Muhammad has put it right. Verse 12, I have heard all thy blasphemies. And verse 13, you have boasted against me, multiplied your words. And verse 30, chapter 36 says something very, very interesting. First of all, the focus is on the high places. What are they? Well, that's Jerusalem, Hebron, Shechem. Yeah, the high places are ours. The places of Abraham are ours. Right? And I think this is quite an intriguing verse, verse 3. Therefore prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because they have made you desolate and swallowed you up on every side, that he might be a possession unto the residue of the heathen, and ye are taken up in the lips of talkers. Let's think about that in a world of social media. You're taken up on the lips of talkers. I mean, what a strange thing. What a phrase that sort of think, well, that's intriguing. What does that mean? Which become a prey and derision. So just pull those out and say, what's happening here in the spirit of those prophecies is the denial of the specialness of the Jews, cutting to the very heart of Jewish uniqueness. They covet the promised land, especially the sacred places. They're motivated by envy, hatred, and spite. They deny the promises to the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they multiply words. They are on the they put their view on the lips of people. This is how the internet age comes into its own to accomplish this final phase. I asked myself, okay, that's where those are they literal last day prophecies, or are they symbolic of the people? Sometimes you could argue that Edom is representative of the nations, and I understand that, and I don't I'd say disagree with it. I just think it's rather remarkable that those ancient kingdom areas are exactly where this problem is now coming from, and it is on the lips of talkers like no other part of the world. And I asked myself, is it possible that envy could actually be the motive? I said, well, I know that's a human thing. Could it operate at an international level? Could envy, human envy in the human heart, determine world events? Right? And then I did a bit of research and I came up with this. Helmut Schuck, a German social scientist after the Second World War, wrote a book which is apparently of fundamental importance in discussing social behavior, the theory of social behavior. Envy, the root cause. He says it can work in a good way or a bad way, but it's a milestone understanding. You've got other publications confronting humanity at its worst. How envy can incite anti-Semitism and genocide. And the answer, I think, from the world of social sciences, yes, indeed. You know what Ezekiel said? Envy and hatred, yes, it can determine the policy of nations. Yes, it can determine international affairs. Yes, it has determined the course of world history. The ancient hatred between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent has its final manifestation in the nations of the world against Israel. And that's where justice is going to come. So this is what the Muslim world has done. You see, as I say, I won't say too much about it because it's online, but you can research this. And here's some headlines. The Jerusalem Post: the West fails to understand the enduring roots of anti-Semitism in Islam. Right? Islamist anti-Semitism is behind Israel's darkest hour since the Yom Kippur War. Let's be honest about the hate that drove the Hamas attack. the Charter of Hamas, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it. Right? There's no main newspaper or broadcaster that wants to say this. Right? These are things that could never be said. But this is Fatah, right? The predecessor to the PLO. The roots of the aggression lie in the Zionist ideology itself, with its belief in the need to bring a select chosen people without a land to a land that is to be evacuated by its. They take exception to the chosen people, even though the Arab nation, which was going to be a pan-Arab republic, stretching from across North Africa to the Persian Gulf, there was going to be one country, right, which they voted for, object to this sliver of land being given because they're the chosen people. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was a Russian fake narrative pretending to be an inside look at the great Jewish conspiracy to control the world, the first Zionist conference, was shown by the Times newspaper in 1921 and the German Frankfurter Zeitung in 1924 to be fake. It's still being published and taught to Arab children in the Islamic world. On the lips of talkers, on the lips of teachers teaching kindergarten to hate the Jews. How is it so powerful? Well, anti-Zionism was a project of the Soviets. Right? They deliberately wanted to undermine Israel's position in the world because it's supporting America, America's supporting it. Right? And there's now a lot of literature pointing out that what's going on in the Arab world was a great success for the Soviets. Right? So they represented Israel as being Nazis. Right? And that became a project of the Soviets to inculcate these concepts. Right? And you see them. And this is from Haaretz, the Jewish newspaper. Zionism as racism, the Soviet ploy used to explain Israel and Hamas. And even at the anniversary of the Nakba, we're told that the PA president, Mr. Abbas, equated Israel with the lies of top Nazi propagandist Joseph Goebbels. This is what he said. Israel and Zionists claim continued by saying that Israel made the desert bloom, as if Palestine was a desert and they made the desert bloom. How many talks have you heard over the years about how Israel made it? No, it didn't bloom. They didn't make it bloom. It wasn't a desert. These are lies, he says, of the Jews. They continue to lie, like Goebbels, and they continue to lie till the people believe their lies. But who's telling the lies? I've seen films of Israel. The earliest I went to was this century, but there are people who have seen the miracle firsthand, and these lies continue. Even the high places are ours. I just ran across here. Remember when Bill Clinton wanted to create peace with Israel? It fell down on the claim that Yasser Arafat made that there never was a temple, a Jewish temple in Jerusalem. And he was asked about that. Well, did Jesus go to the mosque? So they want to deny it. They want to deny it because they don't want there to be a Jewish presence. They want to tell a lie. They want the people to believe. And you see this why Mr. Abbas says we are the Canaanites. Well, we are the Canaanites. We were there before the Jews. Well, they weren't there. You can't make your mind up. Were they there or weren't they there? And if they were there, you're the Canaanites. And you know what happened to the Canaanites. So this is what's going on. Now I'm going to stop there. I'll take stock of what I cover after speedy lunch. Because I was going to try and explain what's going on, why you get this unholy alliance. How is it possible? How is it possible? You could have people carrying two flags, one rainbow and one for Hamas. How is it possible? It does seem extraordinary. It just seems that this is the madness of a world, and it's true, because that's what Revelation 16 tells. It's through unclean spirits like fraud, the spirits of demons working miracles. I think that's an example of the miracle of that demon. A way of thinking, which now is uniting left-wing, socialist, communist, Marxist thinking with the Islamic cause.